If you're working on your first game, I got something really important to tell you and why you should cut your game in half coming up. What's up guys, Tim Ruswick here from Game Dev Underground, and if you're new here, we talk about marketing and motivation and lots of things that have to do with game development, so consider subscribing, hit the bell to make sure you get notifications when we post new videos. But today we're going to talk about why you should cut your first game in half. And let me just tell you a quick story. So when I started my very first game, it was an FPS. It was inspired by Halo. It was this epic space adventure that had to do with aliens and multiple planets and multiple locations and crazy epic twists and killer robots and all kinds of stuff. And this game was called Project Exodus. And it was going to be the best game. Matter of fact, it was going to kill Halo. I was going to do better than Halo. That's how good this game was. And I was in way over my head. It was way too big of a game that I could ever make all by myself. And despite spending years on the game, it was my first game. I even used the engine FPS Creator. Like, you would think that still that would be easy to make an FPS with FPS Creator, but no, it was still a massive project. And that leads me to the #1 mistake that all new game developers make: scope. They start a game that's way too big. This is the #1 problem by far. I still do this, especially in things like game jams. I'm confident that I could get a certain game of a certain size done, and it never works out that way. So scope is being the biggest problem. One of the most effective mental things that I've done to reduce scope is just cut it in half. Flat out cut it in half. And first it sounds like, well, no, Tim, we need this, we need this, we need these guns, we need these aliens, we need, you know, whatever you're saying to me, I get it. You need all the stuff in your game, right? But you gotta cut it in half. You gotta cut half the shit out. And here's why. Because there's no right way to determine what to cut. There's no right way to determine what you should build first. Like, obviously you should build the core game, right? The basic. If you're building FPS, you got to have a dude that runs and shoots enemies. If you're building like a runner, you got to have the dude that runs. You need to build that first, because you have to make sure it's fun, you have to make sure it's entertaining, you have to make sure the mechanics work, you have to make sure, you know, you want to get feedback as early as possible. So that's obviously first, but knowing what to cut out of your plan, of your concept, of your game can be really difficult, especially cutting it before it's even built. But it's really important, especially, and this applies to your first game, right? Like, the more games you do, the more software you build, the more technology you get used to and all this, the better you get at understanding scope and your own limitations and all that stuff. So I think this applies more to your first game. So if you're working on your first game, just cut the game in half. And I know you're going to disagree with me, and I know you're going to say you can't, and I know you're going to say you shouldn't, and you know you're going to say I'm wrong, and I don't know your game, or your game is an exception, and all those excuses, but cut it in half. Cut it in half. Just cut the game in half. Whatever it is, whatever you got planned, cut it in half. If you have 10 enemies planned, go with 5. If you have 100 levels planned, go with 50. Whatever it is, cut it in half. Because here's the beautiful thing about creative projects. Once you complete them, you don't have to stop. You can add on to them. So everything that you had planned, you can add later. But you can say you finished your first game. You can say you put this out there. You can say you finished it. You can say you completed it. And not only that, but when you finish half of your first game, right? Half, because you cut it in half, and you show it to people and you get feedback and you do all this stuff, you'll notice that sometimes what you thought was the right decision is no longer the right decision. You'll notice that people do different things than you expected them to do. You'll notice that people put significance on things that you wouldn't find significant. If you're building like a spaceship game with a bunch of different weapons, sometimes your favorite weapons are not going to be their favorite weapons. So, you know, you might have an obsession with like rocket launchers or something. So you had like 10 rocket launchers lined up, and when you built 5, you noticed nobody used even one. Nobody really liked them. So that kind of stuff tells you a lot. And for your first game, best advice I can give out over and over again, because I get a lot of stuff via email and Twitter especially, cut it in half. Just cut the game in half. That's it. And go from there. And again, you can always modify on top of it. You can always add stuff back in. You can always release patches. But finish your first game, half of your first game, whatever it is. Start with the basic gameplay, cut the features in half, and go from there. And that's it. That's how you get through your first game. That's how I got through mine. I actually had to drop the FPS, by the way, just to bring this whole story to a close. And one of the things we did was, when I realized that for so long I hadn't finished a game, I decided to sit down and finish a game. And I explained the whole story in my Finish a Damn Game video, so you can watch that. I'll link it up. But we built a mobile game, and it took us twice as long, and we had to cut it in half because we had a bunch of features planned. We had a bunch of enemies planned. We had a bunch of stuff. We cut it in half just to finish it. It took us twice as long, even with the half-cut version, but it's still a decent game. I'm not a big fan of the game mechanics, but people seem to like it. I don't know if they're lying to me or not, but it's whatever. And it was my first game, and we got it out there, and we did it, and we finished it. And for me, that was the first time where I could call myself a game developer. So it was a good feeling, and it was worth it. And this tactic or technique got me through that hard period of self-doubt and wondering if I could ever be a game developer because I couldn't finish a game. So I hope it helped you. If you're still working on your finished game, leave me a comment below. Let me know where you're at. Let me know any other issues that you have with this kind of stuff, or whether this helped you or not. Love to hear from you guys. Once again, I'm Tim Ruswick, and I'll see you guys next time.